All right, so welcome back to the channel. Sorry it's taking so long to post. We're gonna do something again that I'm doing, so you're gonna learn how to do it. It's probably gonna be like a 3-part video because if you guys sat through this whole thing, it'd be really kind of monotonous. So what I'm doing is I'm making a first fitting. Okay, so it'll be the first fitting of the jacket, the first fitting of the trousers, and you'll learn the whole process. We're gonna start with the jacket. First, we're going to assume that you've cut your pattern, you've punti-lentied it, you've made whatever adjustments you need to make, and then you made your canvas like I showed you in the prior videos. So in order to proceed, you're going to need the fronts of your jacket for this part of the video. Fronts of your jacket, your made up canvas, a mezzaluna, a sleeve board, needles, thread, or needles and basting thread. And then obviously scissors and thimble, which I don't know where my thimble went, but I'll find it later. So when you start, we're gonna have our fronts of our coats. We've already sewn our darts, okay? Two things when we talk about when we sew. So a lot of people, when they sew, they go up to the machine and they just kind of use their hands like little babies and push the seams through, and they allow the machine to do all the work. But if you think about it, that's counterintuitive because a machine has a presser foot, which is stationary, and underneath the presser foot, it has dogs, and the dogs push the fabric along. So if one side is staying pushed flat and the other side is being come along, then one side is going to actually move quicker than the other side. The bottom part of your fabric is going to move faster than the top side. It's just the way it is because the dogs are feeding that fabric through. So when you hold your cloth, when you're sewing, you're gonna hold it like this, okay? With two tight hands, and then feed it as you go, okay? Because you wanna hold the top layer of fabric tight with the bottom layer of fabric, which is being fed, okay? So don't hold it like you're afraid of it and push it through like this, like most seamstresses and home sewers do. We're tailors and we control our fabric, especially lighter weight fabric like this. This is a Laura Piana Super 150s. So it's gonna need a lot more care and attentiveness to it. So, and you'll notice if you watch, sometimes people that make their clothes at home, they'll have one side of their seam a little rumply and the other side of their seam nice and flat. That's the problem with if you let the dogs do the work, because it's going to pull this side tight and this side loose, and you'll see those rumples. They'll press it and press it and press it, and it'll never go away because it's sewn in. So don't be that person. Next, your patterns are all going to be different than mine. We're just going to assume that, but I'm just going to show you one thing about pressing when you're pressing seams open. One thing before that, when you do any type of finishing, so when you're done sewing and you are done at a point that is going to be seen on the jacket, i.e. the dart that ends here, or the dart that ends down there, or the dart that I have that comes here in the collar that ends here, you're not going to back tack that with your machine. You're going to actually stop the machine going forward, and then you're going to pull out a good length of the thread, cut it off, and then you're going to tie a knot. Okay, so you can come in here, maybe you can see that. See, we tied a knot at the end. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. You want to tie that knot, and the reason why is because we don't want any extra thickness here. When you go back and forth in order to tack, you create thickness. And as an Italian tailor, which is what I am, and what you want to be if you're watching my channel, you don't want any extra layers of thickness, okay? So that's where you tie your knot. Finally, I'm just going to press open this one. So all my seams I turn. Turning means like this. So see, it's turned, flat and turned, as opposed to spread open. Most English tailors are going to open all their seams. They'll open them. That's fine. You can do that if you want. I turn all my seams, and the reason why I turn all my seams is because I pick stitch them in order to add more reinforcement. So they turned, and then from the top, they're pick stitched along the edge. We'll do that far later on down the road. So this one's turned that way. This seam, which is the underarm seam, is turned that way. And then my seam up here, I actually press open. Now, we're going to show you how to press open a seam like a bespoke tailor. So most people would think that you just take your iron and you just press it open and you go along and that's fine. But we don't do that because we want to be able to control this area. We don't want it to be flopped to one side or the other side. We want it to be flat. on itself. So you're going to take your needle, usually keep a piece of thread on it. You're going to go crown first. Okay, so not the pointy edge, but the crown side. And we're just going to feed it in to that part of the dart that we left uncut. Okay, and you feed it all the way to the end. Okay, so now that's going to give us a reference point of how we can press this flat without it flipping to one side or the other. It makes a really clean look on the top of the coat. Okay, next you're going to grab your water, or if you have a plain steam iron, you can just use steam, which I highly suggest you don't use because it's uncontrollable. Okay, so now we're pressing the seam open. I'm coming to where that cut is, and I'm just controlling with my fingers to keep my needle, which is fed in there, nice and at the top of that seam. Okay, then flip it over, and you can already see how clean this all looks now. And then we're just going to do the same thing from the top side. I'm just going to make sure that I can feel my needle, which is hard to see with you guys being filmed at this point, but I can do it through feeling. And there we go. Now you have a nice, clean, even on both sides, pressed seam opening. Okay, so now we've opened our seams. Pull out your needle by using the thread that you left. And we're on to the next part. You can back on up. All right, so we've made our canvas, right? So we've done our horsehair, we've pad stitched it to our body canvas. We have a nice shape. Canvas has the shape we want. Chest, hollow of the arm, hollow of the shoulder, so everything looks nice. Now we need to put this and this together. So we need to marry them together. All right, so I know that we all pressed when we did the pad stitching, we made this shape, but actually what we want is the concave of that. So you're going to take your mezzaluna and you're going to put your canvas just like that. And I believe I walked you through how to do this on our last, on the video on how you are supposed to make canvas, but regardless, this is a refresher. So we're going to reintroduce that shape. We're just going to do it in the opposite way. And again, after we've done all this pad stitching, we no longer are going to press our canvas flat. All right? So everything that you do from now on has to be pressed, has to be made with the idea in mind that you are going to actually continue keeping this shape. If we've worked this hard, which was at least an hour, for most of you probably 2, and you've created all this shape, why would you ever press it flat and kill it? We don't want to kill it. We want to maintain it throughout. This is a way in which that you're able to create the artifice of a chest for people who don't have chests, or if you want to create an artifice of a fuller chest in order to get a reduction in the waist, to get waist suppression. This is the way you're able to do that, all right? Because no man is an Adonis. We all have flaws. We all have things that we want to hide, and we all have, parts of ourselves that we'd like to make better. In my opinion, you should look better in your suit than out of it, unless you work out too much. Then you have different problems, or no problems. Okay, so now we've reintroduced that shape, just going the opposite way that we want it. Same thing. All right, so the job of us now is to take this coat cloth and marry it to our canvas. All right, when we built our canvas, when we built the darts in our canvas, we built it off of the actual pattern that we used in order to make the coat, right? So we found where this dart was. I'm pretty sure I showed you this, but I can't remember. If I didn't show you it, then you'll figure it out for yourself. But basically, you're gonna find where this dart is, and you're gonna create this dart on your canvas. Same with, this dart, but only we don't put that there. I put it at a different angle and different things in order to create the shape. But basically, this dart here is similar to that dart there, right? So we know that because that's the way in which we built our canvas. And so now we know that because also we were smart and we used, made sure we were on the straight grain. We know that this is our straight grain, this line here. And we also know, I know that this is my straight grain here because that's the way my patterns are built. And so I know that if I put that there and flip that over, that everything's pretty much going on the straight grain. Okay. You can also tell if you're intuitive enough that, you know, you have grain going north, south, and east, west on this as well, so you can make sure things are going on the straight grain. All right, so now this is going to be the hardest part of your entire process, in my opinion, because this is your foundation, and this is the first block that's going onto your foundation, and these two need to be put together seamlessly. All right. And in the way in which you do that is that you need, because we've told you this before, anything that is tight, the top layer is tight, the bottom layer will be loose. And if the bottom layer is tight, the top layer will be loose. So if you don't marry these together properly, i.e. the canvas being a little looser in its combination to the top fabric, then you will create little bubbles throughout the coat, or other weird oddities that the coat will start doing once you've gotten further along. And if those happen, you're screwed, and you have to retake everything else apart and do it all over again. So you need to pay careful attention that you are pulling somewhat, not overly, the top cloth tighter than your canvas. All right. And I know that probably doesn't make a whole heap of sense right now, but it's just the way it is. And you're just going to have to remember that throughout your entire career. Next, a lot of people I've seen, when they put canvas on, they flatten everything, all right? Which is, in my opinion, again, counterintuitive, because we are creating this beautiful shape, and we spent a lot of time creating that beautiful shape. And if we just flatten it, then we're kind of unintroducing that shape to the cloth. And we don't want that. We want everything to be done in this manner to keep this shape. But it's really hard to baste this whole thing down with it kind of floating like this. You're kind of eyeballing it, per se, in a way, and we don't want to eyeball anything. So what we're going to do is use our Mezzaluna. I'm going to use this side because it's going to be easier for you guys to see, even though it's more obnoxious for me to do. But because you're on that side, it'll be easier. We are going to I'm going to show you the directions of our basting stitches by using a chalk, and then we'll also go through them, but I'll show you which ones we're going to do by using chalk. All right, so our first one we're going to do is we're going to follow this dart, all right, which is straight. If you don't have a straight dart, if it doesn't go all the way to the hem but it ends in the pocket, you can still start in that general direction. But that's just going to go straight up. All right. Next one is just going to come off of that. I use a hip curve. It just makes everything easier. Okay. Next one is going to follow along just behind our break line. And then all the way down and around to the end there. My next one's going to come off of here and go down and around and stop right about there. I'm going to do another one that's just going to go there to cover, and then I'm just going to continue this one down and around. All right, so those are your 3 lines. We're going to start here, we're going to go there, or not 3, it's probably 4 or 5, whatever. Start down there, go down there and down there and along the edge, and then back up here to there, one more coming out there, and one more going down and around there. All right, and that's all going to house and hold everything together for while we work. Okay, so in bespoke tailoring, as opposed to mass production or made to measure, or anybody else out there who wants to pretend to be a bespoke tailor but's lying to you, in our line of work, we have floating canvases. And floating canvases means that they are not glued or adhesived to the cloth at any point in time, anywhere on the jacket. The only thing that's holding the canvas to the coat at the end of the production of the jacket is our tape, which is not adhesive tape, but it's this cotton bias binding tape. Okay, that tape goes around the edge of the coat, and that'll attach the cloth to the canvas through to there. We'll pad stitch the canvas at the lapel. That'll marry those two together. The pockets will go in, boop boop, and those will help keep the canvas where we want it. And then finally, once the sleeve's on, we tack the canvas to the arm side, or the armhole, throughout there. That's the only thing that's keeping our canvas together to our cloth. Other than that, it's floating. Okay, so we have to make sure that it's floating perfectly with the cloth so that they float together. Hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, write a comment at the bottom that says it doesn't make sense, and I won't respond, and you'll just be stuck trying to figure that out for yourself. All right. So, like I said, we're never, ever going to flatten our cloth, but we're going to use the Mezzaluna in order to keep this shape that we want in the canvas and the cloth. But what we're going to do is we're going to introduce the opposite of that shape. Okay, so the opposite of that shape is the convexed shape, which is this way instead of that way. All right, that way we continue to keep that that shape within, I keep saying shape, but that's the only word I got for it, that shape in the cloth and the canvas. But it's also going to help us because, as I've said before, it's like when you run around a track. All right, the person on the innermost lane around the track has the shortest distance as opposed to the person on the outside of the track, right? So that is going to help us here because this distance from there to there is actually shorter by millimeters than this canvas is traveling from there to there as well. So therefore, we know that that is going to make this cloth tight and this a little looser, and therefore give us the objective that we're looking for by not having any bubbles in our cloth and as it marries itself to the canvas. I'll be right back. I'm back. All right, so thimble, needle. I'm going to take it off the Mezzaluna real fast. I just want to make sure everything is lined up where I want it to be. Okay. So some people start their first stitch lower, some people start it higher. I start it pretty close to my shoulder. And the reason why is because I really want this shoulder area planted in this where I have it. I just don't want it, I don't want this traveling anywhere over there because I need to keep the shape that I want for the shoulder. So therefore I start pretty high up. And you're just gonna make one forward stitch and one back stitch. Okay. And again, also, you don't want your canvas to be tighter north to south than your cloth. So I'm always kind of running my fingers down and pushing the cloth down so that it is a little more taut as I go to the next stitch. Okay, and I'm still just going to make sure that I'm running in the right direction by checking my darts line up, and they do. So everything's running nice on the straight grain. Okay, and for me and for my pattern, I'm going just to the other side of where the dart is. So I've turned my dart that way, i.e. the fabric has been turned that way, And this side does not have the fabric that's been turned, so that's where I'm running my dart, on that side. All right, so after you've gone past the concave of the chest, or not the concave, but the shape of the chest, then you're gonna put it on top of your mezzaluna and keep it a little more flat, but still maintaining the shape that you're looking for. So now we've gone to the actual shape that we're looking for. So I have part of my canvas, or part of my coat, hanging off of the mezzaluna, and now I'm just doing my straight stitch as I keep everything nice and flat and straight. Okay, and then when I get to here, which is where my pocket is, I'm going to make a back stitch. And the reason why is because you're going to cut your pocket in here, and you're going to cut through the canvas. Well, you're not going to cut through the canvas if you're making it my way. You're going to actually cut out the canvas, but that's further down the road. But either way, you want to be able to keep your canvas where you want it to be. And I know that I'm going to have to cut this part here because that's where my pocket is, and that's where I got to make a hole in my cloth. And so I just want to block my canvas right before my pocket. Okay, just like that. If you had more thread on your needle, you could just block there, and then block there, and then keep going down. I ran out of thread, so I'm just going to block it and start a new one. Now I'm going to thread a needle with my bad eyesight. You cheaters. Okay. Another thing, some people will tie knots in their basting thread. I don't tie knots in my basting thread because sometimes I forget that they're there and I go to yank out on my basting and then there's a knot there and it creates a little hole or run in the cloth. So it's just better, in my opinion, if you don't. But if you want to, go for it. But I suggest or advise against it. All right, at this point, once you're past your pocket, you want to make sure that you put everything flat on your table. And the reason why is because now we really want to ensure that everything is straight, okay? We don't want anything clipping over this way or flipping over that way. We want to make sure that everything is straight on the straight grain of the canvas. So that's the reason why I leave this straight edge, the chimosa, the what's it called in English? Selvage. The selvage. And because the selvage is always on the straight grain, we always know that because it's the edge of the cloth, so you can see that this is your straight grain. So you can see now, because also my cloth has a little bit of a pattern to it, or a little bit of a pinstripe, if you will. Not quite, but some semblance of a ghost pinstripe. So I can see that that's going straight and it's parallel with this, so I know that everything's going on the straight. So if you don't have a pattern on your cloth, which a lot of times you won't, you'll be able to see the weave of the fabric, and you can use that to your advantage. All right, and then we're just running down the canvas till about the end. And again, I'm always pushing the cloth taut. All right, I'm not pulling it tight, but I'm pulling it taut. Okay, down at the bottom, block it. All right, a lot of people won't do my next step, but I do it. We've always done it since the day I was started as a tailor. I think this might just be an Italian thing. It might be the way that my maestro taught me how to make a coat. The Napoleons might do it as well. I don't know if the English do it. If they do, cool. If they don't, then I don't know, maybe if you want to make an English coat, see if this will work. It's not like the end of the world. When I make a Florentine coat, I don't do this for obvious reasons, you'll see. But when I have anything that has a front chest dart, this is what I do. And it just is a nice way to keep the canvas married where you want it to be, especially on this straight run, where you want to keep everything, all the grains going straight and together. So what you do is you're going to take a lightweight thread, any color is fine, it's no big deal, no one's ever going to see it. You're going to flip open your coat to reveal where your dart was pressed. Mine's pressed open or pressed to the side, but if yours was pressed open, you'd still see this. And then you're going to do a running back stitch, just to kind of block everything into place. We call this, in Italian stitching, we call it bloccare, which is to block, obviously. So you're just kind of blocking the fabric in a running back stitch. And don't pull it tight. Don't need to be too close together. Far away is fine. And you end up near the top of the dart. You don't have to go all the way to the top. I'm just going to go one more. Pull it through. Okay. That's the end of that. Onward. So the next one we're going to do is this stitch here. It's just going to run all the way down to there. So again, we'll pull out our mezzaluna. And we have not enough thread to do it, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so again, you can see with my fingers, and you can see where kind of, so you know pressure and then pressure, you can see where, from my fingers, where the pressure is actually being applied. So by that redness at the tip of my fingers. So I'm pulling this out and I'm putting some pressure there just to hold everything in place. Start up by your other stitch. And I'm using the back of my stitching hand to kind of pull it taut again also. So you're using all your hands in tandem just to make sure that everything is where you want it to be. And I'm going to loosely follow my chalk mark. And again, I'm using the mezzaluna to create the convex, or the antithesis of the shape that I'm looking for, in order to make sure that I don't have any bubbles, because again, the outside runner has longer distance to travel than the inside runner. Okay, and you can see these bubbles here. So I'm pushing them out towards me, towards the edge of the cloth, all right? And that's because I'm always going to be feeding those out to the edge, and that will get rid of them. It's kind of like when you're applying, I don't know, like a sticker to a window or something, and you use that little thing to push the bubbles out. It's what you're basically doing, but your basting stitches are holding everything in place while you work. Take your time on this, like no need to rush, especially you all who are never probably done this before in your lives. If you've never done this before in your life, you're gonna fail miserably the first 20 times you do it. Sometimes it helps if you have weights. You can, put a weight down just to help you keep that shape, and then you can pull off of that. All right, then I'm going to block this. Golly. And start a new thread. All right, at this point, you're just going to kind of move on down so that we've got the bottom, again, flat. So we make sure that everything is on the straight grain, because that's very important for us, especially down here at the bottom. Okay, so I'm blocking, pushing down, blocking with my finger, putting my needle in, and then I'm pushing my finger towards my needle in order just to slide it through. All right, and that's also another thing that you guys are going to have to learn to get better at, because I'm sure not a lot of you are very used to stitching flat onto a surface. All right, most of the time we're holding things up in the air, or not we as tailors, but you all as home sewers. So you're going to push your finger in where you want it to go, put your needle behind it, and then just kind of push. And we slide down, and we do it again, and we slide down one more time, and we do it again, and we block it. All right, next, on to the next part. Same situation, we're just going down the line, all right? So now I'm loosely following kind of the edge of the brake line, all right? So I'm not up against it, I'm just kind of following loosely along it. Basically like that. And then this is my balance point. That's where my shoulder ends at my neck. This is my kind of where the collar loosely will kind of come on. And then this is where the beginning of the peak is. So I'm going to start, about loosely where the collar comes on. So kind of more down here, because I don't need to go all the way up there. Actually, we're going to go a little bit higher. If we got to take it out later, we'll take it out later, but I'd really want to control this neck area. When you get to near the end of where your lapel stops and your first button occurs, what we're going to do, and this will help us when we want to create the beautiful roll. So the beautiful roll here, a lot of that is done with pad stitching, and a lot of that is done with how you connect the collar, but a lot of that also is done in what I'm going to do right now. All right, so trick of the trade, most people probably don't teach you this in books. I don't know if most people do this, but this is what I was taught by two incredible tailors who taught me everything I know. So you're going to block right there, about, I don't know, that's probably about 2.5 centimeters from my break line, okay? Or from where my roll wants to end, which is this line. This is my first button. Just 1.5 centimeters to 2 centimeters above that is where you want your lapel to stop rolling. So that creates that beautiful roll. So anyways, about 2.5, 3 centimeters above that. Block. Then pull tight. And pull tight. And block. All right. That tightness helps get that lapel to swing over and roll nicely. You're gonna, if you make coats the way I make, you're going to be reintroducing that bit a lot as you make the canvas, or as you make the jacket. All right. So after we've blocked that, we're just going to continue on down the line. And again, we're going to go back to flattening our jacket. That's gotten too tight there. All right, going to flatten our jacket. Keep sliding down. And I'm going to stop right about there, and I'm going to show you another cool thing. So if you'll look at both of these two jackets, especially down here at the quarters, this part here, they cup, all right? So you can see there's a cup there, all right? In fact, if I put this jacket flat, it cups. Doesn't want to be flat, right? So this area here, you can see I'm not touching it. It's just doing it by itself. This area here is this area here on your body, okay? So you here are not flat, right? You curve in. So your jacket should curve in with you. So we are going to create this cupping effect by two ways. One, how we put the canvas in now, and two, how we put the facing, the mostra, or the perimantura, or however you want to call the river, however you want to call this piece here. How we put this piece on is going to continue to reintroduce that fact. So when we make coats or trousers or anything, any shape that we want to create with that jacket or trouser, we continually reintroduce to the jacket or trouser as we make it. Nothing is done without the thought process of, in the end, what shape do I want this to have, okay? So that is why we rarely do anything on the flat. Everything is done with a curve. That's why we have a mezzaluna. That's why we have a sleeve board. That's why we have an iron. That's why we have hands, is to create and reintroduce all that shape. So I'm low on thread on this one, so I'm just going to block it right about there. And then we're going to start to introduce the shape, the cup shape that I was telling you about. And this is not easy, okay? How much you introduce at this point in time is going to be very essential to what you get out of it at the end. If you go too hard, introduce too much of that shape, you're going to actually mess up the front of your jacket, and you'll never be able to fix it unless you open up your coat and, you know, take out some of that morbidezza, that softness, or that that softness that you introduced. Okay, so we're not pushing it up this way. Okay, we're not pushing the cloth up that way. We are keeping it taut, but kind of in this angle right here, we're just introducing a little bit of a bubble. Okay, not by much, not a lot, but just a little bit, because we know that when something is tight and the other part's bubbling, the tightness is going to pull the looser part towards itself, right? So it's the same that you're kind of doing when you're pad stitching the lapel. When you pad stitch a lapel, you're holding it like this, right? So this distance here becomes greater than this distance here, just by the track rule. And therefore, when you pad stitch, this will start pulling this onto itself like a wave. So we want to create the same kind of pull onto itself idea down here, not to that extreme, but just minimally. Okay, so we're just gonna, you can probably see that. I can see it. I don't know if you can, but you're just gonna kind of push a little in while making sure that everything says good north-south. And if my thread wanted to do its job today, it would be done. Let's try that again. Okay, now we're just going around that final edge all the way down to the end. Okay, that's done. Now we're going to come back up to the top and we're going to do the opposite side. Flip your mezzaluna around. Push this down. Okay, so if you've made your canvas like me, which you no way you did because you have no idea the wedge that I put up here, but if you've started to already create the hollow of your sleeve prior to this point, or the hollow of your shoulder prior to this point by introducing it into your canvas, which some tailors do and some tailors don't. Some tailors will wait until the very end. Some people will do it now. Some people do it later. It just depends, but this is how I do it. I want to be able to keep that shape, all right? That manipulative shape. So I don't want my basting stitches right now to travel into this area, all right? I want this area up here free from basting stitches so that I can keep that shoulder and manipulate that shoulder when I'm putting the garment together when I'm putting the shoulders together for the fitting, okay? And that'll come down the line. If you get that far, congratulations. So I'm gonna start somewhere up in here by my other stitches. And again, you're pushing excess material towards the edges, all right? So we're always pushing it, we're not pushing it back towards where we basted, we're pushing it away from where we basted. So from here, we were pushing everything this way. Now we're gonna push this stuff that way or back up that way, just to get rid of the excess cloth and keep everything nice and taut. And I'm gonna loosely follow the thing that I made, but not entirely. And if you can hear that, that's my dog sleeping in the background and snoring. Okay, now that we're at this part, we're just going to continue to control our chest and make sure that it's nice and pretty. And in order to do that, I just come from where my dart stopped. My dart on my fabric. So where my dart on my fabric stopped, I'm just going to start my basic stitch there. And I'm just going to, again, pull everything down. And just kind of do an angle stitch up towards under my arm side. Okay, and then I just kind of come back again in between where I made my other stitches and block it. Okay. Last length of thread. All right, so for this time right here, we're just gonna catch the edge of our canvas. You can feel it with your hand, all right? So I can feel that it goes there, and then it comes to there, and it goes there, and then I'm just gonna come all the way across to my first button, all right? So you're doing this mostly by feeling. You can't feel what I'm feeling, but I can. So start there. Okay, stop with the line you basted first, and then kind of pick your coat up, put it on your mezzaluna so that half of your coat's off the mezzaluna and the other half is on. So again, we're continuing to keep that chest shape that we want. Come on. again, we're just pushing down the cloth. And I just go straight on the line of where my topmost button will be. And that'll also help me in the fitting to know where that button stance is, very easily to read. And then also you can also use it as a guide for if your coat is, you know, out of balance, if it's too short or if it's too long. And if this right on, then this one will be pretty, you know, parallel or horizontal. All right, that's it. You put your canvas in. All right, so we can check it now. And we can see there's no bubbles. We got our beautiful chest. We've even pseudo have this kind of cupping in. There's a little bit of movement there, which we're happy for. So we know that our canvas is in nice. Now we can trim away our excess. Just trim away enough excess of canvas so that it is the same amount of excess as the seam allowance you've left on your jacket. All right? Because if you need to shorten or lengthen, if you need to lengthen the coat, if you need to add a little more to the bottinatura, to the edge of the coat, if you need to add any more to the top of the lapel, you have all that room with the canvas. All right? If you trim it away, and you trim it shorter than your actual coat cloth, then you're going to be screwed if you need to add anything. I don't trim away anything up here at the shoulder. I use that in order to make my shoulders beautiful without using a shoulder pad. You won't know what I'm doing, but I do that. So I keep most of this up here. I will trim away everything down here at the arm side. All right, canvas is in. Part 1 of the video is done. Like, subscribe, share, and this is step 1 of maybe 4, how about 5, who knows, on how we based our coats together for our first fitting. All this work for first fitting.